We're on DAF Zayin Amud Aleph, and we were talking about the idea that once the Zman of Isser, once the Chametz is Usser to me, and I can't get any benefit from it, then it's no longer within my control to be Mevatalit, to mentally make it Hefker. So I'm stuck. And that's why I can only do Bittul before the 6th hour. I can't do Bittul once the 6th hour sets in, from 11 o'clock onwards. So the Gemara now questions this premise, which is sort of I think it's the 6th line in the Gemara. You mean to tell me that once the chametz is asr to me, I can no longer nullify it? We have a braysa that says as follows: a guy sitting in the base medrash, and he remembers, I left chametz in my house. So mevatlu belibo echad Shabbos ve'echad Yantiv, and he's allowed to be mevatel it mentally, whether it's on Shabbos or Yantiv. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Shabbos mishkachas lakagon shechalar basar lios b'Shabbos. I can understand the first statement that even if it's Shabbos you can do this, because it could be that Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos. So the morning of Shabbos, Erev Pesach, you say, I forgot I left chametz in my house, so I mentally are mevatel it. It's not yet usher to me. Ela Yom Tov basar isuruhu. But how can the Brisa also say that you can do this on Yantif itself? Which Yantif are we talking about? We're talking about Pesach. How can you be mevatel chametz on Pesach? It's already the Zman of Isser. It's already the time when it's already prohibited. So Omer Ravacha Bar Yaakov Hacha Betalmid Yoshev Lifnei Rabo Askinon Benizkar Sheyesh Isa Migulgeles Besoch Beisa. The case is different in this Brisa. We're talking about a student who's sitting in front of his Rebbe learning Torah, and he's left dough in his house that has not yet risen. It is not yet chametz. And umisyari shema tachmitz, and he's worried that maybe it will become chametz, and he would love to run home and retard the leavening process himself, but he, out of respect for his Rebbe, he can't. So kodem umavtele mikmi detachmitz. So he's allowed to go ahead before it becomes chametz and to make it hefker. That's what the Bryce is talking about. So we're not talking about something that's actually chametz now. That's already out of his purview. He cannot be mevatel that on Pesach. But when it's not yet chametz, he can still be mevatel it and say it's hefker, so that by the time it does become chametz, he's no longer in violation. And that's actually something that you can infer from the language, because the Bryce says that he's sitting in the base medrash. Why use that as the example? Just say that he's away from his house. What the Brisa wants to communicate to us is that he has the ability to go home and finish baking the dough and making it kosher. It's that he's sitting in front of his Rebbe, so out of respect for his Rebbe, he doesn't want to get up and leave. And that's why, out of respect, that's why he wants to be mevatel it in order to prevent it from becoming chametz. Okay. So the Gemara now says, Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Hapas she'ifsha, keven sheribsa matzah muteres, or sherabsa matzah muteres. Okay, the following case is where you have a box, and it's like your bread box, and you stick your hand into your bread box, and you pull out a loaf of bread. Now, I just want to clarify something here. What's the difference between matzah and bread? That's a silly question, right? In its appearance, what's the difference? Today you say, well, matzah is manashevet, square, whatever, hand matzah, whatever. In the times of the Gemara, the appearance of bread and matzah was almost identical. You went to Dr. Lafa to buy your bread. That's what all the bread looked like. That's what all the matzah looked like. The difference between matzah and bread is that the dough rose when you were making a chametz lafa, and the dough did not rise when you were making kosher lePesach lafa.
And $20 a pound.
Yeah, right. They see the price differential was not as much back then, because the difference between the two of them was, in other words, it was much less. You see, and even today, many Sfardim and Teimanim make the soft matzah, right? So yes, well, what I say is it's like lafa. It's like lafa
for Shabbos.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so the point that the reason why I mention this is, you stick your hand in the bread box and you pull out something, and you can't tell what it is. You can't tell whether it's chametz or matzah, and furthermore, it's become moldy. So that only complicates matters even further. And so, keven sheribsa matzah muteris. Once Once you see that the majority of the contents of the bread box is matzah, so then it's permissible for you to assume that this is also matzah, that this is also kosher lePesach. So the Gemara now says, "Hey chidami, let's clarify this case. Ilay mediyada b'da chametzi. If you know for a fact that this moldy bread is chametz, so ki ribsa matzah my hobby. What help is it going to be that the rest of it is matzah? That's not going to help you. Ela delo yadinan ba chametz hu imatzu. The case is that you can't tell whether this is chametz or matzah. You simply don't know. And therefore, my iriya ki ribsa matzah, fila kilo ribsa matzah nami nezel basar basra. So then the Gemara says, well, then why do you need to ascertain, why do you need to know that the majority of breads that are in this box are matzah in order for you to be permitted to use this moldy bread? Why don't you just say that you can assume that now it's Pesach, we can assume that this was baked for Pesach, and assume that that you go according to chronologically we assume that what's in this box is most recently prepared. And I'll show you that we go basal basar, that we use that which we assume was here most recently. Milo tnan ma'osh nimsu lifnei sochrei behema. We have a Mishnah that states as follows. We're talking about Yerushalayim now. And in Yerushalayim, there were animal merchants that people would go to purchase lambs and cows in order to bring as a korban to the Beis HaMikdash. Let's say you find some coins in front of the animal merchant's shop. So the halacha is la'ola meiser. You have to assume that money has the kedusha of meiser sheni, because typically people that purchase animals, the majority of the money exchanged at the animal merchant's market is meiser sheni money, because people, when they purchase korbanos, quite often they'll kill two birds with one stone, and not yet, quite literally, they'll take money from meiser sheni that they've taken from their produce and brought up to Yerushalayim. They'll make their whatever pilgrimage they need to make, not just during the Shalosh Regalim, but many times during the year, and they'll use meiser sheni money to purchase korbanos with, because that's what you're allowed to use meiser sheni money for. But Bahar Habayis Chulin, if you find coins on the Temple Mount itself, so then you assume that it is Chulin money. Then you assume that it is not Meiser Sheni money. Okay, now what is the reason why you assume it's not Meiser Sheni money? The reason is because the majority of money that is circulated within the city of Yerushalayim throughout the year, the majority of it is chulin money, is not Meiser Sheni money. A significant percentage of it is Meiser Sheni money, but throughout the city of Yerushalayim, throughout the year, the majority is chulin, is not Meiser Sheni money, and therefore, because they're not regularly cleaning Har Habayis, the Temple Mount, you assume that whatever coins you find there, no matter what time of the year it may have been left there 3 weeks ago, may have been left there yesterday, and therefore you assume that it's chulin money. Yerushalayim, but the streets of Yerushalayim, the marketplaces of Yerushalayim, bish'as haregel meiser, b'shar yemos hashana chulin. Then it depends. It depends when you find the money. If you find the money not during the Shalosh Regalim, then you assume that it's chulin. But if you find the money during the Shalosh Regalim, when people are making their pilgrimage, during the Shalosh Regalim, the majority of money circulating through Yerushalayim is Meiser Sheni money. You assume that it's Meiser Sheni. So let's clarify. V'amar Rav Shemaya bar Zera my taima. What's the reason the streets of Yerushalayim are different? Hol v'shuki Yerushalayim asuim lihiskabed b'chol yom, because they sweep the streets of Yerushalayim daily. And therefore, any money that was here yesterday was swept away, and the money was left here from today. Now, Har Habayis is different. The Temple Mount is different for two reasons, Rashi says. One, because it's on a slope, so they don't have to sweep it, because the wind, the breeze, naturally sweeps the surface of the hill. That's one reason. And the second reason is because people walk up typically barefoot. They don't walk up with muddy shoes to the Temple Mount. It's usur. And therefore it doesn't get as dirty as the marketplaces and streets of Yerushalayim. So therefore, Har Habayis money, when you find it on Har Habayis, it could have come from any time of the year, because they're not regularly sweeping the Har Habayis. But when it comes to money found in the streets of Yerushalayim, there you assume that it's from today. And if today is the Shalosh Regalim, so then you assume it's Meiser Sheni money. So Alma Amrinan Kamoi Azli Lei, Vahani Achrinininu, Vahachanami Nema Kama Azl Vahai Deha Idnahu. So therefore the Gemara says, if you have a bread box you should be reasonably able to assume that was whatever was there last week has already been removed, and this is new bread. And new bread was made for Pesach, so why can't you reasonably assume that this moldy bread is matzah, is not chametz? The Gemara answers, Shiny hacha di ifusha mochiach iluya. Answers the Gemara, because it's moldy. And moldy implies that it's been there for quite some time. And that's the reason why. That's the reason why we have to be choshesh that maybe it's chametz. And ifusha mochiach iluha ki ribsa matzah my hobby. So then the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, then what does it help that you have a whole bunch of other matzahs in there? If the moldiness indicates that it's old and it may have come from well before Pesach, then why shouldn't you have to be choshesh that it's chametz? Amar Rabba lo tema sheribsa matzah ela sherabu yemei matzah iluya. So Rabbi says, you're right. Having a lot of other matzahs doesn't help this moldy bread. But what we're saying is like this: it's not sheribsa matzah, but rather sheribsu yemei hamatzah. That it's already well into Pesach. The days of matzah have already come and gone, which means I'm sort of like at the end of Chol HaMoed, and I find this moldy matzah inside. What does that mean? It means that even if this was baked specifically for Pesach, there's plenty of time for it to become moldy, because it's already several days since it was potentially baked as matzah for Pesach. And therefore, since I have no indication one way or the other, I'm allowed to assume that it became moldy as matzah because it was baked for Pesach.
Usually matzah is not getting moldy.
Our matzah. That's the whole point. But if it's a lafa, then there's moisture in it. It can get moldy. So the Gemara says, what?
I thought you said somewhere a few moments ago there was something to do with hana that you get.
You're not allowed to get hana from chametz.
No, altogether. But,
yeah.
But I thought you never mind hana. You're not allowed to possess it.
You're not allowed to possess chametz either. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about you find something moldy in your bread box. We don't know whether it's chametz or matzah. The Bryce is saying you're allowed to assume that it's matzah. Right?
There's no hana was the issue somewhere.
There's no hana from the moldy bread.
Doesn't have to be rare.
One second. No. You may have misheard me. I'm not sure. I don't know what you're referring to. Someone asked me this morning, if it's moldy, why would you want to eat it? The answer is, someone said, make a kutach out of it. Remember, what is kutach made out of? Kutach is that Babylonian delicacy. It's made out of moldy bread.
Milk.
Right?
Milk.
So anyway, so the Gemara now says, Ihachi pshita. So the Gemara says, if its moldiness is due to the fact that it could have been made just 3 or 4 days ago, and it was made for matzah, so then obviously you can assume that it's matzah. What's the chiddush? Lo tzricha di ifusha meruba. The answer is we're talking about bread that is especially moldy. It's green all over, and it's got like little critters growing out of it. So mahu de tema, that will make a really good kutach. No. You'll scrape off the green.
They have penicillin.
That's right. It's a delicacy. Mahu de tema, kevin di ifusha. It's got mushrooms growing all over it. Mahu de tema, kevin di ifusha meruba iglaya milsa devade chametz ma'al yehu kamash malan kevin sharabu yemei matzah iluya armin kol yoma v'yoma nahama chamima off of v'shada iluya v'ivshat fei. So the Gemara says, no, you might have thought that since it's especially moldy, it must have come days and days ago, well before Pesach, and therefore it's chametz. The chiddush is no. The reason why it's especially moldy is because every day over Pesach they were baking new lafas, and as they were baking new lafas, they kept piling warm lafa on top of this old piece, and because of the warmth and the moisture and the steam of all of those new lafas that are matzah, this became especially moldy, and that's what you're allowed to assume is going on over here. So, frek the Gemara omiyas linan basar basra. So now let me ask you another question. Since when do you assume? Since when are you allowed to reasonably assume that this is something that comes from more recently, instead of going backwards in time and being choshesh that it's chametz? V'hatanya Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda Omer teva shenishtamshu b'maos chulin umos meiser, that if you have a box that is used to store coins, and it's used to store both chulin coins and meiser sheni coins, imrov chulin chulin, imrov meiser meiser. then if you find a coin in this box and you don't know whether it's Meiser Sheni, it has the Kedusha of Meiser Sheni, or whether it's just regular Chulin, then the criterion is go Basar Rov, go according to the majority of the usage. If most of the coins in this box are Chulin, then you can assume that this coin is Chulin. If most of the coins are Meiser Sheni, you have to assume that this is Meiser Sheni, L'chumra. Frek the Gemara V'amai. But why should that be? Lezel Basar Basra. Why don't you just say, look at the last usage of the box? Whatever the box was used for most recently should determine the status of this coin. Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak Kacha b'mayaskina kegon shnishtamshu b'mos chulin umos meiser ve'en yodeya eza mehen basof. The answer is we're talking about a box that is used to store both chulin money and meiser sheni money, and we simply don't know what the last usage of the box was for. We just don't know, and that's why we're misupuk, and therefore you can only go basar rov. And Rav Zvid Amar Kagon Shnishtam Shubat Siburin Sibur. And Rav Zvid says that no, there are different piles within this box. There's one pile in one corner of the box that is for Meiser Sheni, one pile on the other side of the box that's used for Chulin, and this coin you found sort of like in the middle, and you don't know which pile it comes from. That's why we say that you look at where there are more coins. And Rav Papa Amar Kagon Di Ishtakach Beguma. Rav Papa has another teretz. He says that this box is buried inside a hole. It's deep inside a hole. And that's why you have to be choshesh that even if the most recent usage was for chulin, this coin may have been left over from a previous usage a long time ago, and because it's deep in a hole which is dark and it's more difficult to access, you just may have forgotten to pull out this coin when you pulled out all the other coins. And that's why you have to be choshesh that it's an older coin. In other words, the Gemara's conclusion is normally you are allowed to assume that you pull out the old stuff first, and whatever you find in the box is really new stuff. The most recent thing that you used it for would be what the status of this object is. So therefore, if the most recent use for this bread box was for matzah, you can assume the bread is matzah unless it's really moldy. That's the chiddush, that you can only assume that it's matzah in a case where there's a lot of days of Pesach that have elapsed. But in other circumstances, you look normally at the most recent usage to determine the halachic status of the object that's currently inside, except when there are mitigating circumstances like you find it deep in a hole. There, it could have been left there for a long time and no one would have noticed it. Okay, let us go weiter. Amar Rav Yehuda, habodek tzarich sheyavarech. Now, Bob Libman, to his credit, had asked about a bracha yesterday, right? So I thought we weren't going to get to this for a long time, but I was wrong. It turns out that it's coming the next stop. So the Gemara's statement is that when you do bedikas chametz, you have to make a bracha before you do bedikas chametz. So, my mevarich, what bracha are you supposed to make? Rav Papi Omer Mishmei Derava levo'er chametz. Rav Papa Omer Mishmei Derava al bir chametz. It's machlokas between Rav Papi and Rav Papa. Rav Papi says that you say levo'er chametz. You use the verb form to eliminate chametz, and Rav Papa says al bi'or chametz. You use the gerund, which is the noun form of the verb, where you say, I thank you, Hashem, who has commanded us upon the burning of chametz. Not to burn, but on the burning of. Okay? So, b'levaer kuli amalo pligi devari la'aba mashma. Everyone agrees that levaer would be a correct terminology. You've commanded us to eliminate chametz because that implies something that I'm about to do, because I'm making the bracha before I do the mitzvah. Ki pligi ba'al bir. The machlokus is it appropriate to use the language of for over the burning of chametz? Mar savar meikara mashma, mar savar lahaba mashma. One opinion is that no, that implies that something that I've already done, that I've already eliminated chametz, and since I haven't yet eliminated chametz, but I'm about to eliminate chametz through my searching for it, therefore it's an inappropriate language because it's not accurate. The other opinion says no, it is perfectly appropriate because al bir chametz also implies something that I'm about to do in the future. So meisvei, let's challenge this. Baruch Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al hamila. Now I make the same bracha like al bir chametz over the burning of chametz, and if you're telling me that implies past tense, that I've already done it, how then can the moil make the bracha of al hamila if you're saying that it implies that he's already done it? Here too he makes the bracha before he does the circumcision, so how could he do that, according to you? So the Gemara answer is hasam hechinema. There, it's the reason why you say al hamila is because you have nothing else to say. What else are you supposed to say? Name a lamul, to say that you should say that God has commanded me to circumcise. That's not accurate because lo sagid lavihu mahil ? what? He's the only one that is commanded to do the bris? For a guy to say, for a moil to say, thank you God, because you commanded me to circumcise this baby, that's not accurate. I was not commanded to circumcise this baby. The father was commanded, and he wants to make me his shaliach. But for me to say that I was commanded to circumcise the baby, what, me and nobody else, that's not accurate. So therefore, since I can't say lamul, the only other option is al hamila, even though it's reflective of something that's taking place in the past, but it's the best language, it's the lesser of two evils, because there's nothing else that I can say. So the Gemara now asks,
future too.
well, the Gemara at this point is maintaining that it's only referring to the past according to one mandamar, and that's why it's problematic. So the Gemara now says, Avi habein ma'ika lameimar, but what about the father? The father, if he's doing the bris, according to that argument, he should be able to say lamul. The Gemara says, in hachinami. You're right. According to this opinion, there would be a difference between in the nusach of the bracha between whether an outside moil is doing the bris or when the avi haben or when the father of the child is doing the bris. The moil would say al hamila and the avi haben would say lamul.
So when you made the bris in your son, which?
What's that?
When you did the bris in your son.
I still said al hamila, and you'll see why in just a minute, because we're in the middle of the sugya. But you'll see in just a moment. Meisvei, baruch asher kidishanu b'mitzvosav etzivano al hashchita. So what about a sheichet who's shechting a behema? He also says al hashchita, and according to one opinion, that implies in the past. But he's making the bracha before he does the mitzvah. So hasan nami heicha nema. But there too, there's no better option, because nema lishchot lo sagid lavihu shachat question mark. Because what else is he supposed to say? Is he supposed to say lishchot? God has commanded me to shecht. God didn't command me to shecht this particular behema. Can't anyone shecht the behema? So therefore, that would be even more inaccurate to say al hashchita. So therefore, al hashchita is the lesser of two evils. It's the best option. So the Gemara says pesach v'kodshim ha'ikal hameimar. Okay, that's fine when you're shechting a regular animal. But what if a person brings an animal to the Beis Hamikdash as a korban, like a korban pesach? There, he is commanded to do the shechita because the Torah says, "V'samaches yado al rosh korbano ushchato," that a person should place his hands on the animal and slaughter it. Meaning that optimally, the person who brings the animal should be the shoichet, should shech the animal. So therefore, according to that logic, he should say lishchot. So the more answer is in achinami. There too, you're right. Just like by bris, it makes a difference whether it's the avia ben or another moil. So too over here, it'll make a difference whether it's the person bringing the korban or whether it's a representative, a shaliach, who's doing it.
A person can shech his own.
Yeah, not only can he, but the Gemara is suggesting that the primary mitzvah is for him to do it. That's the one part that Yisrael is allowed to do is the shechita. Meisvei.
Sometimes the moil lets the father do part of it. I don't think the father does.
Sometimes the moil allows the father to do the chituch, to do the actual cutting.
The cutting, but
Yeah.
is that the bracha? On
Yeah,
the cutting,
as I said, be patient, and you'll see that we're going to fall off of this distinction in just a moment. Meisvei. Here's another thing that we don't paskin like. The Brisa says that when you put together a set of arba minim before Sukkos, then on Erev Sukkos you're supposed to make a shehechiyanu when you bind it all together. We don't do that. We don't paskin that way. Not lo latzespo omar asher kidishanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al netilas lulav. And when you take it for the first time on the morning of Sukkot, you say Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvosav etzivanu al netilas lulav. Now, why shouldn't you say litoles al lulav? You should say again using the verbal form because al netilas lulav implies something that you've done in the past already, and here you're making the bracha before you do the mitzvah. So the Gemara answers Shani Hasam de be'idin da'agba hanafik bey. The answer is because it is accurate because as soon as you pick up the arba minim, you've technically fulfilled the mitzvah. So by the time you make the bracha, it really is in the past tense. You really are reflecting on something that you've already fulfilled, and therefore that's not a problem. So ihachi latseisbo yatzabo mi boile. So then the language of the Brisa is problematic because the Brisa says that when you want to be yotzei, you should make the following bracha. The Brisa should have said, once you've been Yotze, you should make the following bracha. In the past tense, the Gemara says, in Achinami, you're right. The Brisa's language is not completely accurate, but it writes it for symmetry. Because the Seifa of that Brisa talks about sitting in the sukkah, and sitting in the sukkah is something that you do after you make the bracha. Therefore, it also used the language of to fulfill the mitzvah, even though you've already fulfilled it. but only for symmetry with the seifa, not because it's something that you're going to do in the future. The Ketani Seifa, so what does the Seifa say? Ha'osa sukkah la'atzma omer baruch atah Hashem she'echiyanu v'kiyamanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. The Brisa says that when you build the sukkah, Arab sukkahs, you should make a she'echiyanu. Nichnas le'shev ba, then on sukkahs, when you go in to fulfill the mitzvah of le'shev ba sukkah, of sitting in the sukkah, omer baruch asher kiddushanu b'mitzvahsav etzivanu le'shev ba sukkah. You have commanded us, Hashem, to sit in the sukkah. So leishev means to sit in the future in the sukkah, and therefore the only reason why the lotzeis bo was used as a language of something in the future tense in the reisha was to be consistent with the future tense verb in the seifa for the mitzvah of sukkah. So we've defended the position of the Man Da'amar who says that when you say al netilas lulav or al biur chametz, it's all in the past tense, and therefore it's not appropriate to use, right, for the mitzvah of searching for chametz. However, the Gemara says, but you know what? That's not the halacha. The hilchasa al biur chametz the kuli alma miha the hilchasa al biur chametz. Period. The final halacha is that you make the bracha of al biur chametz, and that is the language that implies something that you're about to do, not like the Man Da'amar that says it refers to past tense. And therefore, like Rashi points out, there really is no difference in the nusach habracha between whether you're the father or whether you're a separate moil, or whether you're whether you're shechting your kudshim or whether you're shechting a regular animal. You always make a bracha al hashchita and al hamila. Okay, so when I did my own son, I also made the bracha of al hamila. Okay, so let us go weiter. Everyone, the premise of this whole discussion is that you make the bracha and then you do the mitzvah. The bracha has to precede the mitzvah. Minolin. How do you know this? The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kol mitzvahs mevarach aleihen over la'asiyasa. It's based upon a halacha from Shmuel who says that anytime you do a mitzvah, you have to make a bracha over la'asiyasan, preceding its performance.
Where did he get it?
One second. Hold on. My mashma. First of all, the question is my mashma dahai over lishna da'akdumehu. Where do you see that this word over means that it precedes? Because over l'asiyasan means that it precedes its asiya, it precedes its performance. Where do you see this? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak the Makra vayoratz achimaatz derech hakikar vaya'avor es hakushi. As it says that when they wanted to tell David that his son Avshalom had died, it says that Achimaatz ran through the plain and he preceded the Cushite, meaning he came before him. So you see that Vaya'avor is to precede. Abaya Omar Mehacha. Abaya says that it comes from here. V'hu avar lifnehem. That it says that when Yaakov Avinu was coming out to greet Esav, he preceded in front of them. In other words, he came out first. So it means to precede, to come first. The iba is ema mehacha. Alternatively, you can learn it out from here. Vaya'avor malkam lifneihem v'Hashem birosham. There's a pasuk in Micha that says that when it's time to fight, the king goes out to war in front, and Hashem is in front of all of them. Hashem precedes them. So therefore, you see that the word over means to precede. You have to make the bracha before the mitzvah. Beirav Omri chutz min hatvila. It's too bad that Alan's not here. He asked a valid question. His question was, what about al netilas yadayim? So the Gemara says the only time you don't make the bracha before are the following two situations: when it comes to tvila and when it comes to shofar. So bishlam tefila dakati gavra lochazi. I can understand why you don't make the bracha first and then toivel in a mikvah, because you're at the point before you've been toivel, you're tameh. Rashi explains that we're talking about a tefillah of tumas keri. That when a person's a bal keri, there was a time when there was a halacha that any time you were a bal keri, you had a seminal emission, you couldn't learn Torah until you went to the mikvah. So to say words of holiness before you're in the mikvah is not appropriate. So that's why we tell you first toivel, and then once you're tohar, you can say the bracha. And we paskin this way also when it comes to tvila of a ger. A person who is being magayer, he's converting to Judaism, you can't tell him to make the bracha before he goes to mikvah because he's not yet a Jew. He can't make the bracha. So therefore he's got to make the bracha after he comes out of the mikvah, or after he's been toivel. By the way, every single woman knows this halacha too, because when a woman goes to the mikveh monthly, she also makes the bracha after being toivel once. Why? Because, as the poskim say, Chazal made a low plug, and they said, since sometimes when you go to mikveh, like when you're being megayer, you can't make the bracha before, the rabbis made an across-the-board rule that any time a person has to go to the mikveh, man or woman, it makes no difference, because in certain situations, like when you want to be megayer, you can't make the bracha before, you can only make it bracha afterwards. You also, a woman who goes to the mikveh, even though she could technically make the bracha before, she always makes the bracha afterwards. And therefore, that answers Netilas Yadayim as well, as Mr. Steinfeld had asked. It explains, because Netilas Yadayim, many times your hands are dirty. And because your hands are dirty, it's not appropriate to make the bracha with dirty hands. So that's why Chazal said, you make the bracha after Netilas Yadayim, not before.
Sorry, why is it even a kasha? Because you have to still lift up your hands and dry them, which is part of the process.
That's the answer to the question. In other words, so the poskim say, to create an over lasiyasin, even when it can't be over lasiyasin, you do it that way. But what would be optimal would be to make the bracha before you do anything, before you wash it all, right? So that's the answer, okay?
What's with shofar?
But Ella Shofar, you guys are jumping the gun all the time. Ella Shofar, my time, huh? Right? It's great. You're all asking good questions. But shofar, what's the reason? I don't understand shofar, like Michael had just asked. Maybe you're worried that the guy's going to make a bracha, and then he's going to thumper in the blowing, and he's not going to be able to get out a good sound, and we don't want it to be a bracha levatala, so let him blow first and then make the bracha. But if that were the case, then why don't you require him to make the bracha after doing a bris and after doing shchita? Because he's going to make a bracha before he cuts, and maybe he's not going to cut right.
If he doesn't cut right, he doesn't want to make a bracha.
Yeah, then
Maybe it'll be postponed.
that would be the least of the problems, right?
That's true.
Right. So, but by that argument, you should never be allowed to make a bracha whenever there's a possibility that you're not going to carry through on the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, "Ela Amar Rav Chizda chutz min hatfila bilvat." So rather, Rav Chizda says we're dropping shofar. Shofar, you also make a bracha over la siyasa. You make it before you do the mitzvah. The only time you don't make a bracha before is with tevila. Itmar, Tanya Nami Hachi, Bilvat Itmar, period, sorry. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports this. The brisa says, Taval va'ola, that when after a person goes to mikvah and comes out, Ba'aliyasa omer, Baruch Asher Kiddishana b'mitzvaysa v'tzivan ala tefillah. Then he makes the bracha ala tefillah. Let's go, we got to finish off. Le'or haner. So the Mishnah had said you're supposed to check by candlelight. You're supposed to bedikas chametz by candlelight. So the Gemara says, Minahani mili. Where do we know this from, that you're supposed to use candlelight? Now, clearly this is a rabbinic law, okay, that bedikas chametz is by candlelight. But we're going to bring psukim, not to show that this is a biblical halacha, but rather this is an asmachta, because we're going to bring text from Nach. And text from Nach is not the source of halachic biblical derivation. So clearly, this is sermonic derivation. This is not halachic derivation. So Amar Rav Chizda lamadnu mitzia mimitzia umitzia mechipus v'chipus mechipus v'chipus meneros v'neros miner. So we're going to connect a whole bunch of psukim that have these words that all connect together. So mitzia mimitzia, where's the psukim that connect finding to finding? Ksiv hacha shivas yamim sorlo yimatze bevatechem. It says for 7 days leaven may not be found in your house. V'chasiv hasam vayichapes vagadol hechel vakaton kila vayimatze. And it says by the story of Yosef and Binyamin that when the brothers were leaving town with their satchels and they were accused of stealing Yosef's goblet, it says that he searched, starting with the eldest and finishing with the youngest, and the goblet was found. So the word found is found over here as well, and it also has the word chipus. So umetzia mechipus didei. So the pasuk connects finding and searching, v'chipus mineros, and we connect searching to candles. That the prophet Sfanya says that God says, on that day when I will sort of cleanse Jerusalem from its sinners, it says, I will search Jerusalem with candles, and I will eliminate the sinners with the searching of candles. So anyway, you see that searching is done with candles. V'neiros miner, and we can also connect multiple candles to one candle. D'chsiv ner Hashem nishmas adam chofes kol chad reivaten, that the candle of God is the soul of man that searches all the recesses of the stomach. Now, Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael, the same brisa, similar ideas conveyed by the brisa. It says Leile Yodalit Bodkenes Achametz Laor Haner, that on the night of the 14th you check using candlelight. Afal Pisha in Raya Ladavar Zeich Ladavar, and even though we can't prove it biblically, but there's allusion to it from Scripture. Shenemar Shivas Yomim Sorli Yimotze, because it says for 7 days leaven shall not be found. Va'omer Vayachapes Bargadol Hochel Vakaton Kila Vayimotze, and it says that he searched with the eldest, starting with the eldest brother, going down to the youngest brother, and it was found in the satchel of Binyamin. Va'omer bo Esahiyachapes Yerushalayim Baneiros, and it further says, at that time I shall search Jerusalem by candlelight, and Va'omer Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam Chofes. And then it further says that the candle of God is the soul of man that searches all of the recesses of the stomach. So the Gemara says, Maiva Omer, why did you need that second pasuk from Mishlei of Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam? Mechitei mahai ba'esahi kulahu dekama rachmana lo badikna lah b'Yerushalayim b'nahora da'avuka d'nafish nahora tuva ela b'nahora d'shraga d'zoitar nahora tfei da'avon rabba mishtakach v'avon zuter lo mishtakach. So the Gemara says, because you might have argued that the pasuk in Tzfanya is not a good text, a source text. Why not? Because maybe God's attribute of rachamim is being exercised in that pasuk. When God says, I'm going to search the sinners of Jerusalem by candlelight, maybe candlelight is an inferior method of searching because it's not a strong light. Maybe you need a big torch in order to properly search. Why then is God only searching with candles? He's searching with candles because he wants to minimize the casualties of his search. Because he only wants to reveal the major sinners and not the minor sinners. Because God's rachamim, God's going to have compassion upon his people. That's what you might have thought. And therefore you can't bring this as a source to properly demonstrate that a good search can be conducted by candlelight. So the Gemara says, Tashma ner Hashem nishmas ladam. And that's why you need the second pasuk in Mishlei to demonstrate that no, it's chofes kol chadrei vaten, that the candle of God can actually search out all of the recesses of a person's innards. And that's why the second pasuk is brought in. But by the way, you're right, the Brisa didn't have to bring in the first pasuk of Tzfanya. But many times when Chazal are speaking in sermonics, they don't just tell you the one issue of the halacha, but they tell you many side lessons as well. Look at what we've learned from this Agadata from today, that not only does God search with candlelight, but sometimes he tries to minimize the casualties of Klal Yisrael by not necessarily searching and scrutinizing as carefully as he could. And that in itself is a very valuable lesson. You all have a wonderful day.